The first truck didn't show up for morning delivery. Then the second one didn't either. By 9:17 a.m., we had 3 separate department heads radioing in missing shipments like we were running a damn hostage negotiation with our own supply chain. I watched from the parking lot, coffee in hand, as Damon Greer, fresh-pressed shirt, fake urgency in his stride, stormed across the tarmac, barking into his phone like it might change what was already set in motion. That's the thing about logistics. Once you unplug the right wire, the entire board goes dark, whether anyone's ready or not. You ever build something for 11 years and watch some fast-talking golden boy try to automate it into oblivion in 11 days? That's what Damon tried. Called me a glorified secretary in front of the entire finance sink. I didn't react. Just switched all vendor expiries from active monitor to silent log. You'd be amazed how quiet chaos can be when it's planned. By the way, before we go any further, if you're listening and you've ever been the only thing standing between order and disaster, take 2 seconds and hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of you don't. And yeah, it matters. It tells the team we're not yelling into the void. Now, back to Damon's very predictable implosion. Vendor ops wasn't sexy work. It didn't make headlines. But every contract, every term, every escalation clause was tagged, tracked, and quietly ticked off in my system. Built from scratch, by hand, because no software ever cared the way I did. I knew when Gracewell's adhesive pricing escalator would kick in. I knew that Petrochem required a 90-day notice before any renegotiation. I knew that Alston Manufacturing automatically terminated delivery if a written renewal wasn't logged on file before the end of the calendar quarter. I didn't just manage vendors. I remembered the rules when everyone else forgot the stakes. So when Damon showed up with his procurement transformation agenda and decided the best way to prove his brilliance was to gut the one department that never made noise, I saw it coming. He smiled a little too wide, said I'd be freed up for more strategic initiatives, which is corporate for, I don't know what you do, so I'll quietly erase it. I gave him the nod. He mistook it for submission. That was his first mistake. His second was moving vendor ops under procurement and telling them to let AI do its thing. No one even asked what platform the contracts lived on. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the system they logged into, so I stopped. I stopped reminding people when renewals were due. I stopped nudging buyers when their contacts went silent. I stopped pinging legal when exclusivity clauses lapsed. I didn't sabotage a thing. I just let the rules work, without me. The truth is, I didn't need to make a scene. I'd already built the fuse. Damon was just too proud to notice he was holding the match. Damon loved words like streamline, optimize, and synergize, but his favorite was consolidate. Every sentence he spoke felt like it came pre-packaged from a TED Talk he half-watched on a treadmill. At the Q4 planning sync, he walked in swinging a laser pointer like it was a weapon and said, "We've got too many vendors, too many touch points, too much fat. AI can handle 80% of this stuff. We'll consolidate and automate." Procurement nodded like bobbleheads. Legal was half asleep. I sat at the edge of the table with my lips sealed and my notes open. Eventually, he turned to me. "Anything we need to be aware of?" I scrolled to a page and slid it forward. Most of these contracts include hard non-renewal clauses. If we don't send written confirmation by the notice window, it's a hard stop. No grace periods, no AI bot's gonna talk them out of that. He laughed. Then we renegotiate. Vendors want money, they'll come back. He paused for effect. No offense, but we can't afford to be held hostage by legacy admin work. If it's not scalable, it's disposable. Not scalable. Disposable. I didn't argue. I just sent a memo to legal titled Renewal Clause Summaries, Urgent. It included 27 vendors with critical expiration thresholds in the next 60 days. I even bolded the sections that read Written Renewal Confirmation Required. 2 hours later, the reply came back. Noted. Logging for reference. Low risk. Low risk. I saved the email to my private archive, right next to the incident logs from 2018 when 2 delayed renewal notices cost us $480K in expedited shipping penalties. That lesson had cost us. Damon, of course, hadn't been here to learn it. A week later, I overheard him in a board prep call telling the CFO he could trim 3 amalers in Q1 just by eliminating admin overhead and standardizing vendor touchpoints. I made a quiet note on my dashboard next to his name. optimism, nor liability. You see, there's a specific kind of arrogance that comes from assuming the absence of noise means the absence of risk. Damon didn't understand that silence in my world wasn't negligence, it was precision. It was the hum of systems that had been tuned to run without error for years, because I tuned them. And now, in his mind, that silence meant nothing was happening. Nothing needed attention. Nothing could go wrong. He didn't know that the grace period on 5 key suppliers was already ticking down, that Albrecht Tools required a 45-day site audit before renewing, that Sentinel Lubricants expected a courtesy call before contract rollovers, not legally required, just expected. But when you stop calling, they stop caring. And when they stop caring, they stop delivering. Damon wasn't consolidating systems. He was tearing out the beams from a house and calling it modern architecture. And while everyone clapped for his clean lines and pretty slides, I was quietly watching the structural load shift, waiting to see how long before the roof cracked. It was a Thursday when he did it, but the kind of Thursday that already felt like a Friday in disguise. The site ops meeting had been dragging on for over an hour. Lots of heat maps, line charts, talk about load-bearing ratios from people who'd never carried a system past a deadline. I was halfway through, walking everyone through our supplier compliance tracker when Damon cut in, loud enough to echo. "We don't need contract babysitting anymore," he said with a smirk, tapping his tablet like he'd just cracked the Da Vinci Code. "Procurement owns the stack now." The room got quiet. Not respectful quiet. More like that awkward vacuum where everyone knows someone's being shoved, but no one wants to make eye contact with the fall. I didn't flinch, just closed the dashboard, clicked save, and let the silence sit. No one asked if I was okay. No one thanked me for the 11 years of never missed shipments, never flagged audits, never escalated failures. Damon had given them all permission to forget me, and they took it like a gift. So I did what I always did. I finished the job. That afternoon, I opened my private ops shell, the one nobody else even knew existed, and exported the last clean version of our vendor contact log. It had every name, every phone number, every side agreement, every unwritten understanding I documented over the years. I encrypted it, saved it twice, printed a hard copy and left it in my bottom drawer. No note, no label, just a quiet breadcrumb for whoever figured out too late what had gone missing. Then I opened my reminder center and disabled everything. Weekly renewal pings, off. Contract compliance alerts, off. Expiry timers, gone. No more Slack nudges to procurement. No more quiet, just flagging this in case, emails to legal. No more hand-holding from the shadows. I clicked through each alert like I was turning off the lights in a house I no longer lived in. Then I gathered my things. Not all of them, just the ones that weren't replaceable. A mug from our very first supplier conference, a notebook with margin notes that had saved us millions. My badge, still warm from the day. At 3:47 p.m., I walked out of the building. No dramatic speech, no storming out, just a woman in quiet control, leaving behind a structure hollowed out by ego and blind optimism. And the best part? Nobody noticed. Monday hit like a silent alarm no one remembered setting. It started with a missing adhesive shipment. No big deal at first. Gracewell was usually early, so a delay didn't set off fireworks. But then it was the industrial fasteners, then the lubricants, then the cooling system gaskets, which only came from one vetted supplier due to compliance regulations. By 10:13 a.m., the packaging line was idle, forklifts were parked, and the line supervisors were walking in circles like ants after someone kicked the hill. By 11:00, 4 departments had come to a full stop. Not slowed, stopped. Line operators stood around holding clipboards instead of tools. Supervisors started pulling up last quarter's vendor schedule, trying to piece together what the hell was happening. No one had the real answer. But I did. At 11:42 a.m., Damon called an impromptu huddle in the war room, or as he renamed it, Ops Command. It was the same bland conference room we always used, but now with more panic and louder typing. Vendor management walked in first, already pale. They'd gotten the emails, 18 of them, each from a different vendor, each with the same language, nearly word for word. No renewal notice received per clause, 14.3, contract considered non-continuing, no delivery authorized. It didn't matter how many calls they made, the contracts were explicit. If renewal wasn't acknowledged and confirmed in writing before the termination window closed, the agreement lapsed. Not paused, not pending, lapsed. No product, no trucks, no exceptions. Procurement tried spinning. We assumed continuity under implied agreement, someone stammered. Legal stared like he'd just spoken in cursive. Damon turned red. Not angry red, confused red. The color of someone realizing the thing they dismantled wasn't decorative, it was structural, and they'd done it with a smile. At 1:23 p.m., legal looped me in with a bland internal request. Are you able to advise on vendor renewal oversight for the following contracts? Attached was a spreadsheet I'd built. They'd renamed the tab Legacy Archive. At 1:25 p.m., a follow-up. Could you confirm whether a renewal sequence was logged for Alston, R&M, Petricum, and Sentinel? I didn't respond. At 1:47 p.m., I got a call. I let it ring out. By 2:02, Damon sent a direct message. Need quick clarity on why we're getting these non-renewal notices. Can you jump on? I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I closed the tab. Silence wasn't a tantrum. It was a system reset. The rules hadn't changed. The dashboard hadn't failed. They'd simply unplugged the one person who knew how to read it, and the system obeyed. The factory was built on timing, rhythm, sequence, and right now, static. They called it an emergency alignment meeting, but it looked more like a fire drill hosted in hell. Damon sat at the head of the long glass table, sleeves rolled, jaw clenched, voice cracking between desperation and fake authority. The vendor reps dialed in one by one, or didn't. Half the lines stayed silent. A few hung up after realizing who was leading the call. One rep from Sentinel Lubricants, the same vendor we'd partnered with for 9 years, just said flatly, "We'll resume dialogue once the original liaison is reinstated," and disconnected. Damon looked stunned, like someone had just stolen his name tag. Another vendor from R&M Fasteners, usually too polite for confrontation, asked, "Is Marin on this call? If not, we'll wait." Silence. Then a click. Gone. These were relationships I'd built with surgical consistency, not through quarterly wine and dines or handshakes at trade expos, but by answering emails at 11 p.m., remembering that Paul from Petricum had a daughter in dialysis, that Alston's logistics guy needed buffer zones during Chinese New Year. I didn't build a supplier list. I built a trust network, and now it was gone. Some of them had even warned us. Quiet little emails over the past month. Subject lines like renewal window coming up or quick check-in on clause 14.3. Emails that landed in my inbox and were neatly archived under a folder I called Warnings They'll Ignore. I never deleted them, just kept them, like breadcrumbs, for days like this. Legal pinged me again around 3:40 p.m. We've reviewed the vendor term sheets and need your latest spreadsheet tracking renewal status. Please upload ASAP. I didn't reply. They tried accessing my shared folder. Disabled. I'd revoked access the same afternoon Damon cracked his joke about contract babysitting. Eventually, someone from legal walked down to my old workstation. I wasn't there, of course. But on the desk, tucked neatly under a keyboard, was a single-page printout, not of the full dashboard, just a snapshot. It listed 10 vendors. In red ink, one line was underlined beneath every entry. Auto renewal only valid if contract manager confirms in writing prior to end date. No automation, no AI scheduler, no passive rollover. These weren't SaaS subscriptions. These were legally binding relationships with baked-in termination triggers. The printout was dated 5 weeks ago. They'd had it the whole time, just didn't know what it meant. At 5:12 p.m., Damon sent a group message marked urgent. It read, "We need a new vendor continuity protocol. Suggestions?" No one replied. The spiderweb had snapped, and only now did he realize the strands weren't made of tech or templates. They were held by memory, context, and human consistency, and I'd taken all of that with me. The CEO arrived before dawn, a red eye from New York, unannounced. He didn't bother with pleasantries, just walked straight into the 8th floor war room and told everyone to sit. You could hear a pin drop, even over procurement's clattering nerves. Damon stood at the front, tie slightly loosened, iPad glowing, that same hollow confidence in his voice like it hadn't already shattered 2 days ago. We're taking this opportunity to renegotiate outdated terms, he started. A short-term pause in delivery gives us leverage to consolidate spend and stop, the CEO cut in. Damon froze mid-sentence, his knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. The CEO turned to legal. Show me the data. Legal connected to the master contract dashboard, the one they'd avoided opening all weekend because no one wanted to own the bloodbath inside. The screen loaded slowly. Then the numbers hit. 43 total vendor contracts. Legal began. 21 currently expired. 11 formally terminated per contractual lapse clauses. 6 have issued formal breach warnings citing missed renewal protocol. No one spoke. The CEO squinted. How many of those vendors can we restore contact with? Legal didn't answer. Instead, she clicked into the termination logs. Some had notes. Final attempt made, no response. Others just had timestamps and red banners. Agreement closed, service delivery halted. Gracewell, Sentinel, R&M, Petrochem, Albrecht, the core of our supply chain, dissolved like sugar in hot water. Procurement fumbled some slides about contingency onboarding and supply chain rebalancing, but the CEO just waved them off. Who managed all this before? He asked, his voice low. Legal glanced toward Damon, then back to the dashboard. She didn't flinch. He did, alone, for 11 years. And then she clicked open a folder labeled Legacy Liaison Notes. My initials were on every line, every renewal log, every conflict resolution, every quiet warning, every saved deal. 11 years of uninterrupted precision, now documented only in a directory they'd stopped reading. The CEO turned to Damon. Why was she removed? Damon opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Because sometimes the loudest presence in a room is the absence no one noticed, until everything broke. And right now, the only thing louder than my silence was the sound of systems unraveling in real time. The first call came at 7:08 a.m., a number I recognized instantly, but let ring out. The second came at 7:16. This time he left a voicemail, his voice tight, too cheerful. Hey, Marin, wondering if we could chat. Just real quick, no pressure. Want to align on some open items. There were no open items. There were only broken ones. At 7:42, the email landed. Subject, let's connect. Marin, hoping you're available for a quick sync. We're working through some continuity questions and could really use your insight. Totally understand if you're busy. Let me know a time that works for you. No signature, no title, just lowercase desperation. I didn't respond. Instead, I refreshed the homepage for Karstead Group, our oldest and fiercest regional competitor. A banner had gone up that morning, welcoming Marin Eves, Director of Continuity Logistics. No announcement fanfare, no headline on LinkedIn, just a quiet insertion of a name into a position that said everything. Karstead knew exactly what they were doing. They'd called me the week Damon made his glorified secretary comment. The timing wasn't a coincidence. They'd heard through vendor chatter what was happening. And more importantly, they'd listened. When I asked Karstead's EVP what the role actually entailed, he smiled and said, "We don't want your system. We want your memory." They didn't try to automate me. They just asked where I'd like my office. That same afternoon, Karstead filed a formal bid with my former employer's board. Full logistics takeover of the halted plant. Warehousing, transport, vendor reactivation, freight coordination, material reflow. Everything Damon had tried to centralize and failed. Karstead had the infrastructure. I had the map. Their bid deck listed me as lead compliance liaison for the transition. By 4 p.m., the whispers started. Ops managers texting each other screenshots. Vendors replying to old threads with new contacts. A shift supervisor sent me a one-liner. I told them they couldn't replace you. Guess now they believe it. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because the work spoke louder than I ever could. When Damon called the third time, just after sunset, I muted my phone, then turned it off completely. You don't negotiate with the match after the building's already burned. The debrief started late and ended with silence so thick you could hear the projector fan spin. Everyone was there. Legal, procurement, finance, operations. seated like condemned men waiting for sentence. The CEO stood at the head of the table, jaw tight, hands steepled in front of him like prayer might help, even now. He didn't ask for status updates. He didn't ask what went wrong. He asked one thing. What's our exposure? Legal didn't soften the blow. She clicked to the first slide. Q1 projected losses, $18.6 million, she said. Her voice was steady, detached, almost merciful. Missed deliveries, breach penalties, expedited vendor transitions, temporary labor stoppages. Click. Q2 outlook. Site viability under internal review. If vendor restoration remains incomplete by April, projected quarterly losses reach $34.2 million. We will likely miss our annual production targets by at least 22%. Click. The third slide was quiet. No numbers, just text. Root cause: contract renewal negligence following a removal of original compliance officer. The room stilled. No one dared look at Damon. Click. The final slide wasn't one of ours. It was pulled from Carsted's bid package, polished, professional, and branded in their signature navy and slate. It was clean, smug, even, but not gloating. Just definitive. It read, Facility Stabilization Strategy, Carsted Group, Transition Lead, Marin Eves Target Completion, 90 days. My name sat in bold font just beneath the title. Damon didn't speak. Couldn't. He just stared at the slide, blinking like it might disappear if he didn't acknowledge it. Procurement was pale. Finance was shaking their heads. Ops had nothing left to defend. Everyone was drowning in the same realization. This wasn't a fire that could be put out. This was the foundation caving in. The CEO closed the laptop slowly, like he was sealing a casket. Effective immediately, he said. No single termination will proceed without compliance and legal sign-off. I want every removal decision reviewed retroactively. Still, Damon said nothing. He sat, shoulders curled inward, like he was trying to collapse into himself. And maybe he was. Because this wasn't a stumble. This wasn't a learning opportunity. This was the moment he realized he hadn't removed an assistant. He'd removed the load-bearing wall, and now the entire house was falling. Carsted's update went live at 8:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. No LinkedIn fireworks, no glossy headshots. Just one line beneath a clean corporate header on their leadership page, Marin Eves, Director, Continuity Logistics. That was it. No trumpet fanfare, just presence. Real, steady presence. The kind that doesn't need a microphone because the work does the talking. Meanwhile, over at my old company, the internal memo hit inboxes mid-morning. Damon Greer will be stepping away from his role as Chief Operating Officer effective immediately. We thank him for his contributions. There were no details, no farewell gathering, no send-off donuts in the break room. Just an empty title and a space no one seemed eager to fill. By noon, the CEO had ordered a full audit of all recent terminations. Every department was tasked with reviewing whether critical operational knowledge had been adequately transitioned, though everyone knew what that really meant. It was about me. Or, more specifically, the lack of me. They weren't looking for a new me. They were trying to figure out how they ever believed I could be replaced by dashboards and buzzwords, by automation that didn't know when to pick up the phone, by a title-hungry exec who thought relationships came with install buttons. And I didn't have to say a word. I never sent a demand letter, never leaked a thing, never wrote a dramatic exit email with bullet points and blame. I just turned off the reminders. Let the silence do what it always does best, reveal who's actually paying attention. You can measure 1,000 metrics, track 100 KPIs, automate all the busy work you like. But a system still needs a steward, a set of eyes that notices the wobble before the break, a hand that tightens the bolt before it falls loose. I was that hand. And when they let it go, everything that hand held, contracts, relationships, trust, slipped right through their fingers. The plant's humming now, under Carsted's banner, under my watch. The same vendors, re-engaged. The same compliance logs, now respected. No drama, just restoration. Quiet, steady restoration. Because I wasn't the assistant. I was the anchor. They didn't fire noise, they fired signal. And the moment they did, everything stopped.